Hello and welcome. We're at the We Read For You at the Stellenbosch Business School. We're talking about my new book, Systemic Leadership Learning, Leadership Development in the Era of Complexity. Oscar Wilde famously said, "Fortunately, my education has had no impact on me whatsoever." This book tries to change all of that, particularly in the world of leadership development. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. It's a real pleasure to be here, and gosh, what a turnout. I'm really appreciative about the fact that you are here. While your colleagues, of course, are languishing in ignorance in their warm beds, you on a Tuesday morning have decided to be here and explore the intricacies of leadership development methodologies. So the book's called Systemic Leadership Learning, bit of a mouthful, Leadership Development in the Era of Complexity. It's been a project that was a very long time coming. I started doing the research in 2003, it took about 5 years. Yes, I am slow, but it's just a little bit of a complex topic, and I tried to understand what's going on in the world of leadership development and what else could be done. The book starts off with a chapter called Arrested Development. Anyone, did you used to listen to Arrested Development, Mr. Wendell? I love Arrested Development, and of course their name was chosen very specifically. They were arguing that development has stopped. And so I argue a similar thing. I say in the start of the book that leadership is in crisis and learning is broken. It's not just my view. PwC published a report in 2006. They surveyed 15,000 organizations worldwide. Of those 15,000 organizations, more than 83% said that leadership development had no impact, zero impact, not a single noticeable difference in anybody's performance who had engaged in any of these leadership development programs. So I had the view that there's this bit of a Groundhog Day kind of thing going on in the learning space. You know, as a friend of mine says, he's got amnesiac deja vu. He knows what he's about to forget. And I get the same kind of feeling with training. It often happens something like this. The leadership of the organization get a view of what people need to learn. They tell HR. Sometimes that's in leadership, sometimes not. HR tells the training department. The training department finds a provider, the whole 3 quotes thing, right? The provider tried to cut costs, so they outsource. So they go and find a facilitator. The facilitator then inflicts his full extent of his wisdom on the leader, and the leader then has to assume that as gospel and goes and inflicts that on his staff. And often what happens as the Chinese telephone evolves here is that the content dominates, and the content happens to be what the facilitator knows something about. Often not so much about what the organization actually needs. One of the other interesting things I think that the book suggests is what's actually going on in the mind of the leader, not only in the learning process, but more broadly in the organization. And I refer to this idea of an entrenchment curve, which means that as leaders become more senior, they often lose what I've called suprasystem freedom and authority. In other words, they lose the authority over themselves. I coach a number of people, and after a while, when they start trusting me enough, I almost inevitably hear this phrase, "I'm not sure this place is for me." And people start developing the concept or the idea that maybe this stuff is not welcome anymore in their containing system. And they start feeling a sense that they're losing their freedom. This is another way of thinking about this. As their authority in the organization goes up, their authority over themselves go down. There's also a section in the book on what the organization's all about, which I've called The Empire Strikes Back. The organization is the empire, if you like. And what some of the dilemmas are about the organization thinking of itself as an empire and thinking of its leaders as being just simply part of that empire. There are some other little techniques and approaches and theories developed in the book. Amongst others, a thing called the Alima Bridge effect. It's a fascinating idea, very tragic idea. I'll read that just so that everyone's aware of it. On 31 August 2005, over the Tigris River in Baghdad, 1,000 people died in a stampede. What happened is that there was a bridge. I'm now going to draw an exact replica of a bridge, as you can see. So what happened is people crossed the bridge. It's a huge bridge. More than 1,000 people entered the bridge, but the gate only closed to the inside. When the bridge was filled up, someone on the outside here shouted, "Suicide bomber." That's all they did. They shouted, "Suicide bomber." And what happened is these people turned around, which meant that a stampede ensued and this gate closed. And the people on the bridge killed themselves. So what management theorists do is they look around the world for inspiration and try to think, what is the implication of this for the world of management and leadership? And so the effect is essentially this: when an organization self-destructs due to irrational fear of the outside world and an overly inwardly focus. We should remember, of course, that as practitioners in this field, we are working with something special. We are working with people's minds. And that's a precious privilege that we need to remind ourselves of. And part of that mind, I've argued in the learning process, runs a little bit like this. And maybe we can apply it to our process here, and you can see where you are on this process. So I've called it the idea appreciation continuum. And what I mean by that is you communicate an idea. So I'm communicating the idea of systemic leadership learning to you. And you go, gosh, yes, that's a nice idea. You've been in those training programs, haven't you? That's nice. That's nice. Really like that. Yeah, that's innovative. It's a bit creative. At another level up, there's what I've called schematic resonance. In other words, not only do you think that's nice, but you kind of go, I agree. You're right. You've done this before, haven't you? Another level up is not only do you agree, but you sense contextual relevance. In other words, you realize, not only do I agree with you, I know that this is happening where I work. I can see it in my world. Another level up is that you go, okay, well, I can see it happening there, so I sense an opportunity for doing this differently. As they say on Verymark, but wait, there's more. Because, of course, if it ends at this stage, nothing happens, right? We've all been brought right up to the brink. Gosh, I can see the opportunity. Wow, how exciting. Oh, I got emails. So the next level up is a sense of responsibility, that not only can you sense the opportunity, but you feel responsible for doing something about it. We know that that's not enough. We've all heard a politician say, we must do something about this. And then, of course, you do something. Something else happens. Something changes. And when it does, there's a collision of subatomic particles in that organization, and the ripple effect spreads far and wide, which is one of the reasons I argue that it often doesn't happen. So there are all sorts of models in there for dependency that you can have a look at. And this slide is the sort of ultimate slide of the book. So if you've seen this slide, you really don't need to buy this book. So look away now if you are ultimately going to buy that book. Remember when they used to do that with sport? We're now going to announce the result between the Stormers and the look away now. So here it is, the whole book on one slide. So there's the system of the leader. That's you. Complex, dynamic, energetic, open to varying degrees. There's the system of the organization that you find yourself employed in, perhaps. There's the system of the facilitator, designer, assessor, the whole group of people that brings this thing together. They're a system, interconnected, dynamic. There's the system of the content, open, fluid, dynamic, energized, relevant, applied. And those four systems play in against each other. And that happens against the background of four fields of study. The study of leadership, what is that? What is, now you can see the complexity emerging very quickly. So what's the leader's view of leadership? What's the organization's view of leadership? What's the facilitator's view of leadership? And what does the content say about leadership? Then there's the idea of learning. How does it actually happen? What practically happens in your mind when you learn? There's the idea of story. For the coaches in the room, the narrative. So you have a story. Your organization has a story. The facilitator has a story. And I argue, the content has a story. That's provenance. And then the study of systems thinking. And now I need you to prepare yourself psychologically for what you are about to observe. Some have found it too overwhelming. They've gone into mental institutions. So here it is, to bring this all together. No ooh and ah. It's a tough crowd, this one. I'll do that again. Stop, no. So this is the supra model of the book. It says all these things are interconnected, and I think you can see the number of permutations is significant. But at this stage, I'm going to pause for just a moment, and I'm going to ask you to inflate those balloons if you don't mind. And if you don't have one, then I've got one for you. This tells you a lot about your risk profile, by the way. You can see the finance people are going like this. Let's give ourselves some room. Let's not overstretch ourselves. All the consultants are thinking, this thing can stretch. Tie it up if you don't mind. And what I'd like you to do is the following. So we've got some colors in the room. Actually, we're very limited for time. So let's do the short version of this. What I'm going to try and get you to do is just to bounce your balloon to the center, and when it gets to the center, I want you to bounce it to the outside. Is that okay? This is going to take 2 minutes. So just bounce it to the center like that, and when it gets there, if you're in the center, you need to bounce it outwards. So while that's going on, the book argues that this is what happens during learning. Ideas are being thrown around. Some of them happen at a high level. Some of them are already on the floor. Some of us couldn't be bothered. What is this silliness? Others are saying, I've got more stamina than that. Thank you, sir. It's a pink one and it suits you. And when these systems collide, fascinating things happen. And the degree of predictability is actually quite low. So if I just throw this at you, you just knock it somewhere. Could you see that the number of options there is almost endless? So if all I understand is my balloon, why that is important, and how that works, I'm really not doing justice to the complexity of a system that has an organization with its own dynamic system, leaders with their own dynamic systems, and there's more of those, facilitators with their own biases, backgrounds, schemas, and content with its own provenance, its own dynamism. To me, that creates an enormous potential for fantastic learning opportunities for leaders. And those of you in that leadership space will know just how exciting and thrilling it is to work in that domain. It's been equally exciting and thrilling for me to work with you. Thank you for playing. I appreciate it. Thank you.